Welcome back, my brave and beautiful humans, to another episode of Soul Hygiene. And I am blessed again, as I always am, to have Mr. Rob Scott on with us today, who is the forgiveness coach, and he was one of my very first guests to be on Soul Hygiene. So he's always a pleasure to have on. Um, Rob is also in my Soul Hygiene private group on Facebook. If anyone wants to join, feel free. Just go search Soul Hygiene on Facebook and you'll find it. Um, but we were talking about energies, like who we attract. And I had posted something in the Facebook group which I couldn't find, otherwise I would have read it. But Rob had responded, and he has a good point. Um, he brought up complex traumas, right? And how they differ and what we're attracted to and when we're, I want to say, in that mindset, but I know it's more than that. um I will just say, for me, like, I have complex traumas. um but for me, a lot of when I talk about um you attracting people, you attract the energies that you're putting out there, a lot of that happened to me during my healing journey. But what Rob is about to talk about, because we kinda, talked a little bit before I hit record. What he's about to talk about is completely true, because I can completely relate to the acclimation, right? To continuing the cycle. And this is why people always say you have to break the cycle, you have to break the cycle, because when you have that complex trauma, you're always attracted to the same thing that is negatively impacting you. And I did that for 25 years. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Rob Scott and let him really delve into this topic, because, more so today than ever, I think people are in this category. Um, and I always talk about victims and how sometimes we make ourselves victims, but more often than that, we're victims of circumstance. But we can break that cycle, whether it's complex trauma or some other sort of trauma. There is a way to break that cycle if you truly, truly want to heal.
Mhm.
But you have to want to. And that's another episode. But today, Mr. Pops, our forgiveness guy, is going to talk about, his experiences. I'm sure he'll throw in a few stories, as he always does. But I'm going to turn it over to him. And thank you so much for being here again today. It's always a blessing to have you on.
TJ, it is a blessing to be here, and I really looking forward to the conversation and discussion that we're going to have because what you posted, I 100% agree with you. And it had to do with trusting your heart when you find your tribe, your people, you know when you get into that environment and you start to feel comfortable and trusting
Hmm.
it, to trust it. And I think that's absolutely true, especially for people who are, further along in their healing journey, or,
Hmm.
at the tail end where they're, 100% or close to 100%, and they are exploring the world in a new way, being who they were created to be,
Right.
and figuring out, you know, who do I, jive with, and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And when you get there, trusting that, peace, that calmness in the presence of those people that you wouldn't necessarily have been able to hang out with and be present with before when you were
Right.
dealing with all the complex trauma.
Hmm.
Absolutely. Trust that. Go with it.
Yeah.
When you posted it, I had just, started, learning about complex trauma in a way. One of the lessons that I learned is, you we create what we hate. And the because people with complex trauma have, you know, a bunch of things going on at once. Yeah, they're got a lot of baggage, and it's really confusing sometimes where, parents, can be really harsh and mean with you and then flip on, a dime and then be complimenting you, giving you gifts and that kind of stuff. And so you have this, you know, jumbling of emotions and state of being of like, okay, what do I do? And you grow up in that, and that becomes your norm. That becomes what you kind of gravitate. And like you said, for your life, you repeated the same patterns over and over again. And, you know, I talk about this, with my clients in when we experience trauma and it goes unresolved in our subconscious mind, we, encounter it, we repeat it because we're trying to solve that original file, that original trauma.
Mhm.
And if we gravitate, to those people that make us feel comfortable when we haven't necessarily dealt with our trauma, our complex trauma, whatever, form of trauma
Yeah.
it is, the people that we gravitate towards tend to be the ones who, create an environment where the original trauma took place in the first time. So,
Yeah.
you I completely agree with what you posted. Uh, and at the same time recognize not everyone is at that level, you
Right.
know. And so, I shared what I, thought would be some helpful insight to people who may not necessarily be further along, but it's a it's fascinating how that, everyone's at a different stage, and
Mhm.
awareness of where you're at in this in the whole healing process is very important, so that you can be aware of who who you need to look out for, you know, and is this an actual positive group of people to be around, or are they repeating the same things that you experienced earlier in life that caused a lot of heartache for you? So
I'm gonna interject something real quick because this thought came to mind, but,
yeah.
oh, when I was younger, so my journey was like 25 years of being with the exact same type of person,
Hmm.
a selfish abuser, just very immature.
Hmm.
Um, but I encourage myself now, and I don't know if that's the right word, but those those times were comfortable,
Hmm.
not necessarily in my head,
Right.
but for me personally and for my state of being at that time,
Hmm.
that's what I knew.
Right.
And even though I had people on the outside of my conflict, um, saying, I love you, like, you know, I thought I was alone.
Hmm.
I had isolated myself in my abuse. The thing is that when I started healing and I look back, those uncomfortable situations when I met someone or I was around people, those were the ones that I wish I would have. Why am I uncomfortable?
Hmm.
And when I look back now, it was because they were the opposite of what I was used to.
Hmm.
So now when I get in a comfortable, I guess, situation and something makes me uncomfortable that kind of is similar, you know,
Hmm.
I instantly ask myself, why am I uncomfortable? Is this something that I need to look at? Is this something that I need to, because I think we grow in uncomfortable situations
Oh yeah.
and healing. And you would know that because you deal with people most specifically about forgiveness, but in
Mhm.
other areas too. And I think forgiving ourselves and forgiving other people is one of the most uncomfortable things that we have to do besides taking accountability, right? Because it's not, for me, it's natural to forgive because that's just how I grew up. I grew up learning how to forgive. But if people don't learn how to forgive, if they're not, taught what true
Mhm.
forgiveness is, it's not a natural thing.
No, it's not.
So I imagine your sessions are filled with uncomfortability most of the time until they get to a point where they understand, I have to do this to grow, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that's the whole healing process when it comes to complex traumas. This is things that go back. It could go back generations, but it goes back to, what we remember. Where did this start? Where was this trauma interjected into my life? Where did it begin?
Mhm.
And I've had to go all the way back when and I've told you before and I've told our listeners before, I've never gone to a therapist. Not that I disagree with them, or it was just not something that I've ever done, really, just because I think life is busy and really all the time. As a single mom with 3 kids, it was really, I don't have the time for this. But um I think, like, when I started healing, I was most uncomfortable.
Mhm.
And as I kept going and became more uncomfortable, it was I realized that's what the right thing was to do,
Mhm.
right? We don't grow in comfortable situations.
No, we really don't.
No, because those are things that we already know, and for us to learn and for us to, like, expand our knowledge or to heal or whatever it is, we always have to step out, right? And be
Mhm.
like, "Okay, I don't know math, so I'm gonna have to learn math." Well, if you don't know math, that's an
Yeah.
uncomfortable situation.
Right, right.
Pick up a math book and learn math, and I say that because 'cause I'm a numbers girl, like, most of my life, but, trigonometry, that was not one of my fortes. Very uncomfortable for me. Still never made it through trigonometry. Oh,
Geometry.
um,
Right. So
geometry,
I scored well somehow, but it was one that just did
you
not click.
fought through it, huh?
Oh yeah. And they
Yeah.
say, if you're not good at trig, you're good at geometry. If you're not good at geometry, trig. So it's
I mean, I would say that because I was pretty good at geometry, but was not good at trigonometry. So anyway, yeah, I completely agree with that sentiment, and I like the fact that, when I posted that, it was where I'm at,
yeah.
in my healing because I realize that what I'm putting out there is what people are attracted to,
Hmm.
and that makes me feel good because I'm attracting the right kind of people, and I know that I am, right? So when I reflect on who I am as a person, I can say, okay, you know, I'm pretty proud of myself for getting this far and for being authentic and vulnerable in everything that I do,
Hmm.
because that's what I want from other people, right? Just be real with me,
Right.
you know? So, but I like that you came back and you were like, okay, yes, I agree with that. But there are people who, you know,
Aren't
they're
quite
not
there.
there yet. They're not there yet. Yeah.
And
So
there's
when
nothing wrong with it.
no, absolutely not. And I think we talk about it all the time. Like everybody's trauma is different. Everybody's healing process is different. It's just like a snowflake. There is not one snowflake that is identical, right?
Mm.
Not one. You will never find a snowflake that's identical. And that's just like people. I mean, God didn't create us all to be the same,
Oh
you
gosh,
know.
no.
I would not wanna be a version of you, and you definitely would not wanna be a version of me, so
No. Vice versa. Yeah.
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 But, um, yeah, but I think that it's so true, like, that's why I I think this platform is what it is because it gives people of every wherever you're at in your journey, right? Wherever
Mhm.
you're at, it gives everybody that, "Oh, okay." You could be here, you could be here, you could
Yeah.
there's there's different phases. I wanted to ask you something though,
Yeah.
because I know that you've just started this journey of understanding complex traumas, right?
Mhm.
What they are. I mean, you have your own.
Oh, yeah.
When you are talking to somebody who has a complex trauma, do you look and reflect on your own? You know what I mean? Like when you're after your session, after you're
Mhm.
done, does it make you look back and reflect on your own and be like, okay, I can see where this would help me personally?
That's a great question, and I would say sometimes I do reflect on that, especially if it's something that resonates strongly with me. I
Mhm,
make a mental note to go and do some of my own forgiveness work around it, or go work with another forgiveness practitioner, because I know that there's probably some more stuff that I need to deal with, in the session in my own work. Uh, I get a There's a little bit of rub off, I think that goes on, when I
mhm.
work with people who you know have something that I haven't gotten to touch on yet. But I would say by and large, you know, it's all of their stuff and keep it on them, and I just make a mental note to go and do my own work, you know, when I have some time, because I know that I've got a lot. I've worked through a lot, and I'm realizing I've still got a lot more to go, and that's okay. It really it's a lifelong journey of shedding the old self, the self that has taken on other people's, you know, beliefs and opinions of who I am versus who, in my case, in your case, I believe, is who God says I am. And
Mhm.
you know, for me, one of the biggest things that I do aside from the forgiveness work is I read what God has to say about me, read it out loud, because life and death is in the power of the tongue. And I've spoken death over myself enough to know that I don't want to do that anymore. Like, physically, uh, impacted my life. I've always thought of myself as an old man. And lo and behold, when I came back from South Korea, from mission work and teaching English as a second language, went to a chiropractor, and one of my lower spinal columns was acting like a decrepit 80-year-old man. Like, it was deteriorating. He was like, uh, be mindful of all that you do. So, like, I know how impactful the spoken word is, and God's truth is God's truth. It's the truth, and that's what I want to start speaking over myself, and I am. So
I
those
think that's the best approach because God says we're fearfully and wonderfully made, right? So when he created us, he didn't create us to have traumas. He didn't create us to have all these weaknesses and all these things that make us victims.
Yeah.
He didn't create us that way, and he doesn't want us that way.
Gosh, no. He wants us to have life and
I
life to the full.
Yeah, and so I think that when we talk about being a victim or complex traumas, things that happen to us, I don't think I've ever once blamed God for the
Mhm.
things that have happened because he didn't have anything to do with it, you know? This
Mm,
was other people. This was me not realizing the strength I had,
mhm,
you know? Um, and I think that's a lot of people get that's where I don't know, there's a hiccup with a lot of people when it comes to believing in God and things that happen in life, you know?
right.
Um, it's blame God for this, blame God for that, but God really didn't have anything to do with it. He created you to be, wonderful and great and to have these things, all these talents and things within you. The one thing I stress to people when I talk to them or my listeners is that we have all the tools within us. We have strength, we have determination, we have, all these things that can get us to where we need to go, that can
Mm,
help us heal, that can help us become victorious. We just have to grab them.
right.
Um, and there are some people who will disagree with me, but when God says he made us in his own image, I know that all those tools are within every single person,
Mhm.
you know?
Yeah.
And I think that's why I just want people to realize that, you know? You have the strength. You have it. And if you need someone to believe in you, I believe in you, you know? Because if I can do it, I was on that precipice of ending it all,
Mhm.
you know? And when you talk to somebody who was right there, who
Yeah.
is where I am now,
It's
there's that's a miracle.
yeah.
That's a miracle. And there are tons of miracles in this world,
Mhm.
you know? And if I can, and if those people can come off that precipice and say, I don't want to be this way.
Yeah. Uh, and that's the key is making that decision.
Hmm.
Uh, it's another thing is you're also taking responsibility.
Yeah.
And and what I found, is that a lot of people talk about wanting to change, but taking responsibility is a bit of a challenge because then it requires work. And but
Hmm.
once you go into the work, you do the work, you get through it, life does get better. No. And when you're in new territory, going back to, the whole, you know, complex trauma, can you trust, your gut, your heart, with these new people when you're experiencing healthy relationships, healthy, boundaries and love and all that kind of stuff with new people as you're leaving the old behind, that's actually going to be uncomfortable. It's
Hmm.
really uncomfortable because it's something you haven't necessarily experienced a lot, if at all. And so the cognitive dissonance is going to say, oh, you need to run. This is not good for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's a tendency to go back to the old, which is familiar and comfortable,
Right.
but you have to push through and recognize, being able to step back, like, you mentioned, and recognize this is good for me and
Right.
get un- get comfortable with that uncomfortability until it becomes comfortable, and then you get to start living life in a whole new way, and it
Yeah.
it just becomes really magical.
I completely agree with everything you just said. I I've lived it the last 5 years, and literally every step of that I have I have gone through.
Yeah.
And I think when I decided that I wanted to change, I wanted to be different, I wanted that light inside of me that God had put there
Mm,
to really illuminate and to help other people, I realized truly what love was.
mhm.
And when people say, like, love is the basis of everything, I really believe that.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be the love of partner or the love of someone else, but I've seen where people truly love you,
Mhm.
and just having those people believe in you and love you gets you through that situation, right?
Yeah.
Um, and I really want to stress that with soul hygiene because there are so many people hurting, so many people that are victims. It's like if they can hear that someone truly loves you,
Yeah.
it ain't gonna cure you. It ain't gonna automatically everything's gonna be hunky dory, you know,
Right.
but maybe it'll encourage them.
Mhm.
Maybe it'll inspire them, you know? It'll help them be like, you know what? I want that. I want to feel what love really is. You can't do that until you're through this process.
Yeah. Yeah, and you have to go through the process, but having I read in a book once, and I forget the name of the book, so I do apologize. But the successful people are the people who have others, handful of people who believe in you, not
Mhm.
necessarily, the vision that you have, but believe in you and
Right.
believe that you are capable and love you enough to tell you that, to be that safe place
Right.
to fall back on when you're struggling, and making the changes and going through the transitions and that kind of stuff. And that's what every person really does need in their life. Yeah.
And even the people who say, "I don't have anyone, I'm all alone." There may be a few people who don't have any more family who are, you know, really by themselves. But I do encourage, okay? I encourage, find someone,
Mhm.
find someone who is not in what you're in, is not in your trauma, is not, like someone outside of there that
Yeah.
you can talk to, a pastor, a teacher, you know, anyone who you can just sit down with. It doesn't have to be I don't know why there's like the stigma of therapists and psychotherapists, but
Well,
just
everyone
find
wants to
one.
be perfect
Yeah.
in everyone else's eyes.
I mean, I encourage people, find one person, you know? It takes one person. I have a best friend who is literally my rock, you know? Like anytime that I was feeling down, anytime that I was having anxiety or I was going
Mhm.
through things and I didn't understand why I was feeling this way, I could talk it out. And at the end of the conversation, it was, I love you. You got this. Keep going. It's going to be worth it. And I think having someone believe in you is so, so important
Mhm.
when you're in this kind of journey. Because it doesn't become an adventure until you're you're over here and you're like, "Okay, I get it. Let's go. Let's help other people." Then it becomes an adventure, which I think I'm in that realm right now, but,
Definitely.
um, 5 years of really, really soul scrubbing and going through that trauma, going through every bit and every piece. I mean, there were nights where I would cry for hours, like, why did I do this? Why did I?" you know, going through all those what if, regret, regret. Um, when I look back on it now, uh, I don't know if I regret anything.
Right.
And some people would look at me like, how can you not? I'm like, but what is regret going to get you? It
Nothing.
doesn't help you. It's not there as a tool to help you heal. It just holds you back.
Hmm.
And if I can look at it and pick blessings out of it and be like, I wouldn't be where I'm at right now
Yeah.
unless that stuff had happened. For me, that's what helps. For
Yeah.
somebody else, it may not. But um, I think we definitely need to have another episode where we really talk about the complexity.
Hmm.
Why did I say it like that? The complexity of trauma and from like a young age and how it can affect you because I think a lot of people are like, "Oh, I have PTSD or I have this." And some people diagnose themselves, which is fine.
Yeah.
Um, like if you have
You,
it, you have it. You should know if you have.
right.
But I think helping younger people, especially, who are less than 30 years old right now, helping them understand that this is not trauma you have to carry with you for the rest of your life.
Right. I wish
You
I'd known.
know?
I wasn't even aware of it,
Yeah.
of the stuff. I didn't truly realize, and I can go into the story in another episode in more detail, but I didn't truly realize I had much of a problem until a friend of mine, actually one of my martial arts students, sat me down and said, Rob, you have an approval addiction. I know because I've been there. I was blind to all of my stuff because I was running away from it. 95% of our actions come from our subconscious.
Right.
And I was running. I didn't want to I didn't want to take responsibility. I didn't want to see things. I was, going to be the perfect person. And yeah, that led to a lot of stuff. And there's a lot of reasons why, from my childhood, I was doing that. But
Yeah.
once that, you know, realization, that wake up call came, it started me down a journey that I'm still on today.
And I think we're always on that journey, right? I
Or
mean, I don't ever think I'm going to stop wanting to be better, wanting to know more, wanting to help people more. I
yeah,
don't think you will either. Um,
no.
but like I said, I think it goes from being a true journey of healing to being an adventure.
Mhm,
I think you and I are in that adventure phase where we're like, we're excited to help other people because we know how good it feels to be on that other side of trauma.
mhm.
Um, so I
Uh,
think it, no, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, which is why agree with you, us taking another episode to talk about the complexity of trauma, and I can share some of the pictures that have come up from my past, and some of the clients that I've had who've shared, before, you know, it's complex, it's wild.
And I want to say this very mm, lightly and tread lightly when I say this, but the word complex can make it confusing, can make it seem that there's no way out, that there's no resolution. Um, because that's what the word means. Right? It's complex, it's complexity, it's a maze, and um, it's very hard to endure. Um, and I almost wish that wasn't the word used. You know what I mean? For complex traumas, because it almost makes it seem that it's gonna be an ongoing process for the rest of your life and you're never gonna get out of it.
Right. It is definitely daunting.
Yeah.
That being said, it it's not impossible. And
Exactly.
and that's even though it is complex, which basically means it's a little bit more work than
Yeah.
you know, than someone else who, may have just, you know, had to
Gone
grow up,
through a divorce or something
gone
like
through a
that.
divorce, or,
There's, yeah,
grew up in foster care and, had this one time issue and, that's taken care of. But it doesn't mean that it is impossible or never ending. And that's,
right.
complex can have a bad rap, but it
It does, because when I think of the word, I automatically think of that. I automatically think of this labyrinth where it was, and like I said, I'll tread lightly because I've been through it. I feel like I have some expertise in that area. Like
yeah,
I felt like I was in that maze for years, not knowing how to get out of it. That's where the complexity comes in, right?
yeah,
Because you're dealing with so many different traumas all rolled into one body
yeah,
and having to deal with every single one of them.
yeah,
Um, so
yeah.
the word
Well,
itself is kind of, mm, I don't know if I really like that word when it comes to traumas, but like you said, it isn't impossible. And I love that it isn't.
no, and to help with the impossibility or the challenge of it, when you have good tools to deal with the complexity,
Right.
that makes the complex, become simple. And
Right.
it's instead of trying to, chop down a tree with, a Swiss Army knife, saw, you have like an actual, chainsaw that makes
Right.
the task very manageable.
Much more doable.
Yeah,
Yeah.
still going to be work, and it's still
Right.
going to,
Yeah,
but
for sure.
it's not going to be never ending at most.
I think that's why I created the 7 days of soul scrubbing.
Yeah.
It was specifically for me. That's how I dealt with it. That's I would just concentrate on one word
Mm-hmm.
every day. Um, because it was sometimes it was just so overwhelming to have to deal with so many different traumas in your body. But I'm excited to delve into this topic a little bit more
Yeah.
the upcoming weeks because I think there's just so much there that the listeners can glean,
Well,
like you don't have to stay trapped in your trauma.
yeah. I hope I can bring some value,
You
some
always do.
and and some, some tools, to use.
Yes.
So
It's
that's
always a blessing to have you on. And I will definitely put Mr. Rob Scott's information in the bio like we always do. But I appreciate him always bringing his expertise and his very sensitive heart. He's there to help people, and like I said, his main focus is forgiveness, which I think you can't heal unless you're willing to forgive. I mean, that's
yeah.
one first and foremost one of the most mm, uncomfortable things that you have to do. There are many more, but
That's why sometimes it's, needed, to have someone else to walk that.
help, yeah.
So that's I'm basically a guide,
And
subconscious.
that's okay. We all need one.
Yeah.
We all need one. We have our earthly guide, we have our heavenly guide, right? But I think God definitely creates, you know what? And that's the other thing. I think that, he doesn't want us to be victims. He doesn't want us to have traumas, but he can use them for good.
Absolutely.
And I think that's what he's done in my life and your life and, you know, other people's lives who've gone through it who just want to help people. So I'm pretty blessed by that too, that there are always blessings to be found, right? Even in the bad.
Yes, ma'am.
So thank you so much for joining us today. And we will have Mr. Rob Scott on, again in the upcoming weeks as he's become our regular. But I'm always blessed to have him here. So thank you so much for listening to another episode of Soul Hygiene. We will see you soon. Bye bye.